Being straight, is that a fair sexual preference or is it discrimination in dating? What about not being inclined to date any people of colour? Or screening off potential dates based on height or looks? What counts as discrimination in dating and what is just following your preferences? Hello and a very big welcome to Surprising Ethics, the show that promises a surprising idea about ethics or political theory in every single episode. Many thanks to the ongoing support of the Centre for Research in Ethics, an academic research centre based in Montreal. Today our topic is discrimination in dating, and this is the last topic of this inaugural year of Surprising Ethics. This is a super interesting topic and I have two guests for you today. Now, I will be inviting listener voice notes on this episode for the very first listener special of Surprising Ethics. So do send in your thoughts on today's episode by sending a voice clip by the 19th of July 2026 to my email address, william.gildea, Gildea, @McGill, that's MCGILL.ca. We'll then have a summer break and we'll be back on September the 1st or October the 1st at the very latest to kick off the second year of the podcast. As always, we begin with the status quo on our topic before looking at a surprising alternative. So what is the status quo when it comes to dating and discrimination? It seems to be that we are free to choose whatever partner we want, that we needn't worry about discrimination when it comes to decisions about who to go on a date with, who to marry, who to have sex with, and so on. More fully, the conventional view is that we do have duties not to discriminate, and these are very important in the public sphere, but they do not extend to arenas that are intimate and personal, like dating. So the very important principles that says don't discriminate on the basis of race or class or disability and so on, these apply to employment, to commerce, to housing, healthcare, and so on. But they do not apply to decisions about dating because sex and romance are special. As always, here are some audio clips that demonstrate the status quo, with the caveat that many may find these clips drawn from social media to be offensive.
Would you rather date a black man or an Asian man?
Black guy.
Would you rather date an Indian man or an Asian man?
I think they're equally not my type, but I would probably date the Korean just because they'd be culturally,
Would you rather date a Latino man or an Asian man?
Latino.
Would you rather date a white man or an Asian man?
White.
Okay, interesting. Look, I think people can have racial dating preferences. There's nothing wrong with that.
She was vibing with me, and we just picked it up and then went from there. So now I date white women now.
Which race do you find most attractive?
For me, Latinos. I like their lashes and their eyes, the color of the eyes, and their face expression.
I just don't really date Asians. And all three of them are Asian.
What's your type?
My type is tall, dark, handsome.
And race
funny.
preference?
No race.
But you don't date
besides
them.
Asians.
So these clips demonstrate that many people think it's fine to have these kind of race-based preferences, for example. And they're willing even to express them on camera. Now, many people will think that we shouldn't put these preferences on our dating app bios or voice them explicitly at all. But there is a general view that people do have preferences in this regard and that that's fine, that in itself it's not really a moral issue, that we can't really be held responsible for liking who we like. Now, an interesting, surprising alternative view about dating and discrimination has been developed in a recent journal article by Simone Degn and Søren Midtgaard, two Danish philosophers who were based at Aarhus University when they wrote this. and fortunately enough, they are today's guests. Now, do remember, once you've listened to the conversation, to send me your voice note by the 19th of July 2026 if you're listening to this when it comes out. This can be a few seconds, it can be several minutes, and do include a name or pseudonym and a rough location. I can try and put it through a voice distortion mechanism thing if you want me to, and if I get enough, you might be on the next episode. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to ask what discrimination in dating looks like, what kind of people are being discriminated against potentially, and maybe you can walk us through why there's a kind of nuanced debate to be had here.
Yeah. Okay, let's we'll learn, Søren, how to do this. So you ask who gets discriminated against in the dating sphere. So we see different social groups that get discriminated against. Usual minority groups, actually, the disabled, the unattractive. We can be more specific, like the tall women, the short men. We see within racial groups, we see different hierarchies of who is deemed attractive and desirable. So Asian men, for instance, experience a fair bit of discrimination as sort of not deemed attractive by most other racial groups. And Black women, for instance, experience discrimination in a similar way. Whereas Asian women also can be discriminated against in the dating sphere, but are sought after or fetishized in a way that, so they're not rejected and not chosen, but they're instead sort of sought after in an uncomfortable and potentially harmful way.
Right, and so where does the kind of puzzle come in, or why isn't this just a simple case of, discrimination is just always wrong on the one hand, or other people might just think people have free choices and they can have their own preferences? Where does the nuance come in? Why is this a kind of tricky or interesting debate?
I think it's an interesting debate because sort of many in the literature, and also I guess people in general, would assume that sort of there are very few constraints sort of in what we can do in our dating life, sort of say that we have certain preferences and we we can act on those preferences and we do not sort of have to justify having certain specific, even racialized preferences, whereas if those racialized preferences were in the mouth of an employer, for example, that would be sort of blatantly wrong. I take it that many would say that, even, of course, I mean, it could raise some eyebrows, but still sort of if in a friendly conversation someone said, I have a preference for this and that racialized group, I think that it could raise eyebrows, but it people wouldn't say that's sort of impermissible, that's sort of wrong, of you're sort of violating a certain right by having those preferences. So in that way, there's a sort of interesting asymmetry between how we treat discrimination in our private lives vis-a-vis discrimination in a public setting.
Yeah, there's this maybe sense that we have to we have preferences in the dating sphere and we have to kind of run with those preferences. We can't really, if we try and go too sharply against them, it's not going to work. We can't have a dating life where we're kind of going too far away from our preferences. Whereas I guess in the employment case, an employer can simply choose to ignore their prior preference for say white workers, and they can say, well, that's just, I've realized that's wrong, I can just select other candidates or amend the hiring document that says here's the procedure. But I guess that's the sense in which it seems harder to do that in a dating context. Okay, so then moving to your view, kind of in a nutshell, what is your general view that you present in this new article about discrimination and dating?
I would say sort of the main takeaway is that we question this asymmetry. It's widely shared, I think, amongst those who work in philosophy, but also more generally, I would say that people think this is quite okay to discriminate in the dating sphere. and we push against that, at least in certain senses, such that if the sole reason for not wanting to date a person is, for example, dislike of this person's racialized features, or even sort of a sort of particular sort of favorable view on this person's racialized features, this has some wrong-making features that are sort of similar to the wrong-making features that we find in other kinds of discrimination. And I guess that this is this is a controversial and I hope an interesting view. And one thing I think I like about the view, or sort of find persuasive and hope that others do too, of course, is that often sort of when people are arguing for the asymmetrical view, they make this point that in order to sort of act on our preferences and in order to sort of be able to flourish in our love life and so on, we need to have a right to discriminate. And I think we push against that idea that actually you can abide with certain familiar anti-discriminatory constraints and still flourish in your love life. Actually, I would say that it's a misconception to think that sort of we need to be able to discriminate. I think that's a sort of, in a way, a bizarre view, because when we discriminate, we often sort of do it by using stereotypes and sort of categorizing people in certain ways. And this seems to be at loggerhead with the idea that when we meet another person, we should sort of focus on the sort of specific individual.
And I think also I would like to add that, importantly, like Søren and I are not trying to be the dating police with this article and saying you should definitely date this type of person or this member of a certain group. But we are asking people to reflect on their preferences in the dating sphere.
Yeah, and I think there's a misconception when people discuss sort of moral duties in this sphere. They quickly sort of jump to the idea that, okay, then you sort of have a moral duty to date certain groups, or when certain people are in need of friendship, then you should sort of be obligated to befriend those people. And I mean, that's one way of fleshing out duties, a not very plausible way. And we're trying to say there's a sort of array of duties that we could have in this regard, as Simone also mentions, simply an idea of sort of a critical reflection also on our preferences, but also those sort of basic constraints that it's not a valid reason for deselecting a person that this person is has a certain group membership. At least not in the standard cases. We allow that some minority groups might, for different reasons, for example, their culture could be threatened in various ways, and you could have specific reasons to want to date one that is a member of your own group. But I think it's sort of in what we would say the standard case, it's not a good reason.
Yeah. So you're not saying we should go around dating people who are from minority groups, or that we have any obligation to go on dates or have relationships with people who would otherwise not want to for whatever reason. It's a kind of procedural or like process-based duty. So it's like a duty to reconsider the way that we think about candidates to go on dates, or it's a duty to kind of reflect on our preferences and where they've come from, right? So it's not saying you have to do something you really don't want to do. It's a duty to reconsider. Is that the view?
Yes.
Yes, I would say that's sums it up.
I think people can also easily think that when we tell people that they have a duty, then it must be action based, in a sense you have to go and do something. But we're asking for a duty that stays more or less in your mind. So, and that's why it's deliberative, it's reflecting. I guess you could also talk to your friends about your preferences. That would also be a way to, I think, exercise that duty. Yeah.
I see. Yeah.
So it's not outcome, as we say, outcome oriented.
Yeah. And Søren, you picked up on this point that actually you might have a more flourishing dating life if you act on this duty of non-discrimination. Can you unpack why that would be the case a bit more?
Say I want to have this birthday party, and I only want people with this religious belief or with this racialized feature, and that sort of many people in the literature believe that this is a sort of condition for a flourishing intimate relation. And what I'm trying to say is that there seems to be a fundamental flaw in that argument, in the sense that the reason on the basis of which you're sort of excluding certain people has nothing to do with the individual or partial features that they have. It's because you don't like the category, or you have some stereotypes about this group. So I think that avoiding being discriminatory in our friendship, dating, and so on, means that we can, to a higher degree, cater or to be attentive to the sort of particular features of the persons that we are sort of relating to. Imagine that sort of you find out you have a partner, and you find out that sort of it has been crucial to this partner that you are Caucasian, for example. So that was sort of a very important feature for the person who selected you. I would find that this would be something of a disappointing reason for this partner finding me worthwhile spending time with, because it's sort of in a way this partner would not be treating me as an individual, but more as a sort of member of a category that could be substituted.
So before kind of getting to the practical implications of your view, I wanted to first ask about an objection. Many people might be sort of surprised to think that we don't just have a kind of right of freedom of association here, right? That is, that they might think, look, we can choose who we interact with, we can choose who we consider as friends or as dates, and just as we can kind of choose who comes to our birthday party or which employers to apply for a job, we can also kind of pick who to speak to, who to ask on a date. And we don't owe it to anyone to give them kind of romantic attention. And so long as, this might be a common view, so long as we don't make public any kind of potentially upsetting or jarring dating preferences, if we just privately act on these preferences, that's within our rights as kind of autonomous beings who can kind of just choose what we do when it comes to these optional interactions. What would you have to say kind of against that kind of common view?
I would, if I can begin, I would say that one problem in the way of depicting it as you do, and I think you actually summarize very nicely also how the sort of people would approach it from the point of view of freedom of association, for example. I think that one of the problematic features about this framing is this idea that moral constraints are sort of an external feature that are sort of constricting or fettering our choices, and it's sort of something that is sort of inconvenient and limiting of our freedom. And I would say that in many cases, I take it that when we engage in relations with others, we do so sort of with certain sort of moral parameters already in place, and even as something that is sort of important for the relation in question. So I take it that sort of these moral norms need not sort of be restrictive, but might actually be some that are sort of a condition for a valuable relationship.
And so moving to the kind of practical implications of your view, I want to talk about lookism or looks-based discrimination. So you have this part in the paper where you say, look, imagine we're in a kind of sex club and you see someone with a certain body shape who wants to talk to you, and you kind of ignore them. You walk past them. You don't interact with them, and you say that this is kind of morally problematic. And I can imagine someone saying, well, finding this very surprising, and they might think, if I'm not attracted to someone, why do I need to kind of invest any resources in that interaction? And they might further think, as a kind of another justification for this, that the person who's ignored only wants to be engaged with if it's kind of because they're attractive to that person, or not just because they have a minority status in some way. And so I wonder, it's kind of two questions in one. Sorry about that, but I wonder if you can firstly clarify when looks-based discrimination is fine or not fine in dating, and also speak to those objections, that I mentioned.
I think Søren, you might be better suited for that question.
I was going to say the same. I'll put it here, but no. I think it's the way you put it is challenging. I think, and we actually had a workshop related to the paper, and we had some pushing exactly that line. So, these being very clear about your preferences and might be good at both ends. So I guess one answer would be sort of to emphasize what I'm sure that Simone also would agree, that it's not a sort of this direct duty to date or to engage in kind of physical relation if you are adverse to that. We shouldn't sort of just out of hand reject this person. I sort of saying that it's problematic if you use a certain feature and say this is sort of silences all reasons for engaging with this person. Sort of, if this person has a crooked nose and so on, then I don't want to have anything to do with this person. But still, this is compatible with saying that there could be many reasons for us not wanting to engaging with this particular person.
I think also practically speaking, if we talk about the sex club example, there might still be other moral constraints, right? You still don't have, even if you don't find a person attractive who's come up to you and shown your interest, it might still be polite to not just walk past them or ignore them completely. So I think that's also worth saying, that you don't have to be impolite, right? When you reject people in the dating sphere, and rejection is also a part of the dating sphere.
If I recently taught a course on feminism, and we had this paper by Kugler, it occurred to me that we often in these contexts sort of, we want, as you sort of implied by the question, sort of, we are often focusing on the ideal case in which people are mutually attracted, and you have, and of course, consent is a necessary condition, but there might also be other reasons for sort of engaging with people. Sometimes we can, as they put it, Kugler, for example, do other people a favor.
That's interesting. What did you call that again, Sam?
It's
like like sex based on given as a favor, or sort of.
That's one of or an offer. So the idea is that consent is in place. I mean, that's not debated, but then it could be that we are too sort of purist when it comes to what are the sort of acceptable reasons for engaging in sex, and we have a sort of romanticized view that this is when both sort of are attracted by the other, and there could be a variety of reasons that are passable, despite the fact that person A might not be particularly sort of attracted to person B. Yeah, so that was just a thought in that regard. It's controversial for that, I can see, but
for sure, that's interesting, especially because I wrote in another paper that I'm quite against charity dating, and I guess also charity sex in that sense. That's a super interesting view. I'm definitely skeptical.
Yeah, that's.
I guess there's often like a gendered element in that, but I guess we could flip it and imagine maybe a woman who is normally discriminated against in the dating market, maybe that kind of person receiving that kind of like quasi gift might be a bit different, I guess, intuitively. I don't know.
Potentially.
Simone, what do you think?
Yeah.
I think it's Srinivasan saying that nobody wants to sort of be.
No one wants a mercy fuck.
Exactly. Yeah, you're not mincing words, but that's exactly. That's
Quote end.
Yeah, and I can see that, but if the alternative is no engagement, then sort of it's of course desirable to be desired by others, but if you're not, I mean, then there might be sort of non-ideal ways of engaging that that are interesting to entertain. Yeah.
Hi, just a really brief message to say, if you think this podcast should reach more people, then hitting follow would be so useful. So if you can, thank you so much. So it seems that like looks are quite important in dating, in the sense that people might have preferences of different kinds. But can you talk about the distinction between what counts as looks-based discrimination and what counts as a morally permissible use of looks to make dating decisions? So are there some looks-based features that are fine to go off? People might have all sorts of preferences, like they only date people with long hair, or they only date people who are taller than them or shorter than them. Whereas other ones, like racialized ones, seem very different. But how do we draw the line between those two things?
I think also we didn't probably define this at all in the paper, Søren, but don't you agree with me that there's something about, let's say, the example of height versus freckles, for instance? So hardly anyone, few people probably, but hardly anyone dates based solely on whether or not the other person has freckles or not. And so that becomes a bit of an innocent dating preference to have, because it just doesn't affect that many people. Whereas short men, or let's say tall women, experience rather systematic, sort of aggregated, they experience the aggregated consequence of so many people having that type of preference.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But still, wouldn't you say that, for example, in terms of how tall a person is, it would be a hard sell to say that this would be impermissible to act on?
Yeah, they're completely allowed, I guess, on our view, to act upon those preferences, but they might want to reconsider, let's say, the tall women who don't want short partners or men. They might still be under our duty to reflect just a little bit. Is there no way that this guy who has all the attributes that I would like in a good partner, but he is shorter, that's the only, so to speak, factor about him that doesn't align with her preferences, then she might still want to consider.
Yeah, I agree on that sort of idea that it's problematic if we sort of let it completely silence all the other reasons, as you say, that could be in play. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, I'm kind of almost at risk of forgetting that. So it's not that we can't ultimately act on preferences like, I don't know, symmetrical facial features or something to do with cheekbones or whatever, but it's more to do with like giving those preferences scrutiny and being open to considering someone who doesn't have a symmetrical face or whatever as a partner, rather than saying we can never have a kind of profile of maybe a type or maybe preferences about looks that we act on in the end case.
Yes,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So my next question stems from a kind of Netflix show. So there's a show called The Later Daters, which is all about like older people going on dates who are really struggling to find someone. And in one of the episodes, there's this white man And he says he only dates black women. And he says that his kids are mixed race, and now he's dating again after a divorce or breakup. And when he's on the date, he makes his preference clear. And he tells his date, and this is the quote, "Black women are at a higher level of energy and passion." What does your account say about the ethics of this kind of case?
Essentially, he is allowed to have that preference, right? Essentially. But he is under the duty, as we all are, on our view, to reflect on that preference. We can also discuss whether the comment that he said is appropriate, or is it does it express a certain stereotypical view of black women?
Yeah.
Is it harmful for that reason? So what do you think, Søren? Is that?
Yeah, no, that was exactly the way I would go. The last point you made, because we do endorse Robin Zhang's view. She has an excellent article on this. It's called "Something Wrong with Yellow Fever." So this preference that some have sort of treat or want to date specifically Asian women. And on the face of it, it could be okay, or people could say, okay, yeah, that might not be that problematic. It even sort of, on some views, favorable to the group, and sort of, but then when you sort of dig deeper, then you often see that those features that are being highlighted, that they sort of come with a very problematic baggage of stereotypes.
And I think also maybe worth pointing out that freedom of association works in all directions. So black women would also be completely morally, it would be morally permissible for black women to reject him. He might have that preference, but he might never end up, in this case he did apparently, but he might not end up again with a black woman.
Yeah. And there's an interesting point you make in the paper about replaceability or fungibility. That if someone is very much seeking someone of a specific race or whatever, it might be they're kind of treating them as somewhat replaceable. Like if they just love women or men of this race, they're kind of keen to have that kind of person, no matter what. They might regard the individual as somewhat replaceable, and that might be inconsistent with love, which requires an individualized attention to someone. At least sometimes that might be the case here, I guess, as well.
Exactly, and I think that actually goes back to this point about when we act on those categories or stereotypes. Then we're not really treating the person as an individual, as you're also implying by your point there.
So I have my next question is, I guess you could say it's about the ethics of being straight, or it's about the ethics of completely screening off people of a given sex or gender. So, which is, I guess, one controversial way of understanding what it might mean to be straight. So you say that it's not okay to categorically exclude people of certain races, right? To walk around thinking, I'm just never going to date someone of this race. But then you do say that it's okay to categorically exclude people of certain sexes. In other words, it's fine for men to walk around being like, in their minds, I'm just never going to consider another man as a potential romantic or sexual partner. And I just wonder whether that view is a kind of available to you given your theoretical commitment. So here's a kind of case. Imagine like two male friends and they're really good mates, and one of them realizes that they kind of have the best ever life together. They could be really happy as husbands, and this is suggested. He suggests this to the other man. Would it not be incumbent on the more hesitant party who is receiving the suggestion to at least consider that, and maybe to consider it thoroughly? Or is it okay for him just to kind of shut it down and never treat it as an option, and for him to be like, I'm straight, bro, like I'm not gonna and never to consider it? Is there a kind of obligation on on men to sometimes consider other men, even if they think of themselves as straight?
I think our argument could plausibly be expanded to also, include that. We only discussed looks and race generally in our paper, but I don't see why it doesn't extend. He still does not have to kiss his best friend. He doesn't have to marry him or become or have sex with him. But he could still, he is still under the duty to reflect on his preference for excluding men.
Yeah, I would second that, because I like the way you posed the question, in the sense that actually there's a sort of consistency in saying that if you sort of have duties in one regard, in the racialized features or in other features, why does this not apply to gender? And I think I would formulate it in the way that say that if you're rejecting a person for a date on the sole ground of the person's gender, then it is a form of discrimination. We can discuss how sort of problematic it is, but it is a sort of actually sort of straightforward case of discrimination.
And the type of deliberative duties that we defend don't require anyone to think about this question every day or several times a day. They can revisit this duty a couple of times during their life, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, that's a kind of surprising result, I guess, like that it could be discriminatory for a man not to consider another man. But I guess before we're all cancelled, like we're not saying that there's anything wrong, like with being straight or whatever. Like it's just like consider whether you really are straight in this context when your friend is asking you, well, maybe we could be husbands, like. But it's fine to be like, I've considered it and I really couldn't do that, or I don't want to do that, and also I guess you can define being straight as a more of a kind of like a summary of a more complex situation. Like maybe someone who's straight says they think about these things and they find that they're almost universally only attracted to people of quote unquote opposite gender, but that's their kind of working intention or working assumption, but then that's sort of same as being straight. So but yeah, sorry, just to repeat what you said, it's like a duty of attention or considering.
Yeah.
And I guess it's just important to sort of say that, again, we're not the dating police. So if you have done the duty of reflecting, of thinking about, does this feature silence all other good reasons to date this person, etc., and you end up with the conclusion that I am not into this person right now, that is morally permissible.
Yes. And then maybe a final question about like how dating is changing today, or how things are moving. Do dating apps make this problem of discrimination in dating worse, or a lot worse? Or do they kind of introduce people to those that otherwise never meet and never consider, and at least they kind of consider it? They're kind of in a way forced to consider people they might never otherwise consider, and kind of broaden their horizons. Like, what's your sense of how these apps are changing things?
I mean, I guess it's really hard to say, empirically speaking, so we can talk about our intuitions probably. But the thing is that we don't have any data on how people behaved in the dating sphere. We know who gets married because that gets registered officially, right? But how people dated before dating apps is, I mean, where's the data on this? It has to be self-report, and people don't remember who they talked to and who they kissed Friday night on a bar 20 years or 30 years ago. So there's a bit of it's a bit of a difficult question to answer. But I think we can also distinguish between dating platforms who are very based on and focused on pictures versus dating platforms who are less focused on pictures. So those that are so heavy on photos pretty much probably make the problem worse. But other dating platforms exist, right? It's a design choice that they make.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been great.
It's been so great. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Nice conversation.
Yeah, it's really fun. Often more fun than than doing revise and resubmits, which is what I'm doing the rest of the day.
Yeah, we just got warmed up. It was a little hard in the beginning, but.
Oh, well, yeah? Was it? It didn't seem like it was hard.
No, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. There's something about warming up, talking about the topic, and you remember details or examples that are really good.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun topic.
Right, that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting this podcast in its first year. Do send me your voice clips if you're listening to this in July 2026, and hit subscribe so that you can tune back in the autumn for more surprising ethics.